Molly, you had mentioned earlier that a lot of these MSAs with larger companies can be pretty one-sided. What are some examples of that one-sidedness?
I've seen it again. I only know when they don't work. I know it's different when they do work, right? Because it's a problem. But yeah, I reviewed one recently from a large company that said basically is if they weren't paid in a timely manner, if the invoices weren't paid in a timely manner, then they had the option to take a lien out on the company's accounts receivable, the entire accounts receivable. And I thought that is a very drastic measure for it. And, I'm really fortunate and glad that our client asked us to review that because I struck that language expecting some pushback. And they didn't. But, I'm wondering now how many people have just signed that and have now subjected, their entire business basically to a lien so that this company can get paid. And I don't know how many of you guys have dealt with liens previously. It's not that super easy to unwind, it necessarily. And it's judicial intervention in all of these things. And then, of course, it's not, then it damages your reputation within the community of like, we had to go put a lien on them to get paid. Well, you could be talking about $4. You could be talking about $4 million. Like there's a whole span in there. And of course, everything, the details don't become so important. It's just, I had to put a lien on ABC company because they didn't pay me, which they were entitled to do. But, it's things like that that can be very, very one-sided. The legislature has worked to balance those out, particularly with indemnity provisions. Some of these old MSAs used to be, you're going to be responsible for everything out there, whether it's my fault, your fault, the dog's fault, the wind's fault, anybody's fault. It's all you if you want to be out there. Unfortunately, the legislature and the courts have balanced that out and require, reciprocal indemnity, and that I'll take care of mine, you take care of yours. And there's got to be things that are back and forth for that to even be enforceable. And if they don't meet that, then, it's not going to be anything. Yeah, they used to be pretty oppressive, and waterboarding is a good analogy, I think.
Molly, that's not that there used to be oppressive. They still are in some
Yeah,
cases.
okay,
Uh,
fair, fair.
but it's, things that we see that are very one-sided. And really, for the most part, most of the clients that we work with, and we've kind of reviewed 100 of these things, 200 of them over the last 10 years, that generally folks are willing to work with you. Where it's one-sided is whenever they slap a piece of paper in front of you and say, take it or leave it. And there's no practical discussion or conversation even willing to be had where, hey, this service agreement that you put in front of me is clearly drafted for a frac crew and not a land service firm, right? So you're telling me I have to comply with OSHA requirements, HS&E requirements. I've got to have a safety program in place to have a landman sitting in their room running title on Inverus. Those things, that's very one-sided. It's not practical. They won't allow us to strike it because, their posture is we don't accept changes, or it's going through a procurement group that's not knowledgeable. Maybe they're an international procurement group that handles the procurement for, Apache, or something like that. And they're looking at a global sense, versus, a land company doing land work in the lower 48. Things like that. One-sided is payment terms, when they, say you have to bill us once a month and it's on a net 60 or net 90, I've even seen. Well, that's significant if you're a smaller group that's having to float that payroll for a long time before you're ever going to get paid. And rarely do companies actually pay when they say they're going to pay. So you just tack on another 15 or 20 days to the back end of that. That, and the third one has a big effect on landmen is just the insurance requirements. Some of them have just crazy amounts of insurance that are above and beyond really the exposure that they would have for a land services firm doing land work. So, if you can't get any movement on there's times you're going to have to pull out the pocketbook if you want the business, to make sure you can adhere.
Yeah.
All in all, it hurts at times,
Yeah.
but it is what it is. And that's the business decision, it's a business case as a service provider, do I want, is there enough on the back end? Is the
Mhm.
carrot big enough? And then you make those decisions as to whether you're, can comply and are willing to take the risk if you're not in compliance, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about this in the past, but if someone's so one-sided in their MSA and they're not willing to change it, is that really someone you want to partner with and align with, right?
Yeah. The unfortunate thing is sometimes the land person you're working with is a great, reasonable, practical person. They don't have, and maybe the whole land
Mm.
department, but they just maybe don't have any weight within the company, to
Yeah,
actually champion, your request and champion the change. So it's sometimes just out of their hands, but you got to make a hard decision at times.
yeah.